Some experiences do not arrive slowly. They burst forth like a luminous crack in a territory you thought you knew. This kind of awakening is not a beautiful idea to collect in the mind, but a silent rupture capable of reshaping everything you understand as reality. The reason to watch this video until the end is simple. We are not talking about distant concepts, but about something that already pulses within you, waiting only for the right key to be revealed. Why does this matter? Because the world you see every day may not be the world as it truly is. Small shifts in perception have the power to completely alter the way you experience time, relationships, and even your very identity. What once seemed fixed, solid, and immutable begins to reveal its malleability, as if it were fabric in constant vibration. Today you will be guided to a point where science and spirituality meet, between electrical synapses and ancestral intuitions, between quantum particles and expanded states of consciousness. Those who remain until the end will not only intellectually understand this movement, but will also be able to feel it resonate as direct experience, as a calling that reorganizes your way of inhabiting the real. This is not an invitation to believe in something new. It is an opportunity to perceive what has always been before you, but hidden by haste, by conditioning, and by the habit of looking only at the surface. The awakening we will talk about will not be just another piece of information. It will be a transformation that, if you allow it, will forever change the way you see reality. Realizing that reality is not static is like feeling the ground move beneath your feet, not in a destructive earthquake, but in an unexpected revelation that what seemed solid also breathes. Awakening is not limited to a distant spiritual experience. It begins within the most intimate functioning of the brain, in the synapses that fire, in the neural networks that reorganize in response to new stimuli. Neuroscience shows that consciousness is not only a product, but also a producer of what we call the world. The human gaze does not capture a ready-made scene. It participates in its construction, filling in gaps, shaping colors, inventing contours. This realization leads us to perceive that reality has never been something given, but a dynamic field of interpretations in constant change. Awakening arises when you realize that what your eyes register is not the whole, but only a filtered fraction, organized according to memories, expectations, and conditioning. At this point, the inevitable question echoes. If everything is filtered, what is the real? Quantum physics, with its language that resembles poetry and paradox, points to the same horizon. Experiments with particles suggest that matter does not behave in a fixed way until it is observed. Observation, in this sense, is not passive. It participates in manifestation. The awakening we propose here is to see life through this lens, understanding that you are not merely a spectator of an already written play, but a co-author of every scene. This perception may seem abstract, but it directly affects the way you feel your own existence. In everyday life, the mind seeks security in linear narratives, the past as something fixed, the future as something projectable. However, just one disruption, a word that strikes deeply, an unexpected silence, an unusual encounter, can break this linearity and open space for a new state of presence. Awakening happens in these breaking points, revealing that reality is more malleable than we usually believe. This malleability is not mere philosophy. Studies show that meditation practices physically alter the brain, strengthening regions linked to attention and compassion. In other words, the way you direct consciousness transforms not only your perception, but also the neural structure that sustains that perception. Awakening, therefore, is not a supernatural event, but a process that interweaves biology and inner experience, science and mystery. Some describe this process as waking from a dream, but it is not about denying the dream. It is about realizing that even dreams are gateways to possible realities. What you consider real may be only the most consensual version of an infinity of possibilities. This understanding does not need to generate insecurity. On the contrary, it can expand your sense of freedom. If reality is not a rigid prison, but an open field of construction, then each conscious act alters the whole. Each choice resonates in waves that go beyond what can be measured. Awakening intensifies when you begin to recognize the patterns that previously went unnoticed. The rush of daily life conceals subtle signals, the way a word echoes differently at certain moments, the sensation that time expands in certain experiences, or even the intuition that something has already been lived before. These signs are not isolated coincidences, but evidence that reality is not limited to the succession of hours, but to an interconnected field where consciousness and matter touch. At this point, an inner shift arises, realizing that absolute neutrality does not exist. To see is always to create, to feel is always to participate. Reality is not merely observed, it is shaped by the way you receive it, and it is precisely this point that marks the difference between living automatically or living awake. Awakening, therefore, does not promise definitive answers, but opens a state of sensitivity in which mystery ceases to be a threat and becomes nourishment. Reality, in this new perspective, is a living organism that responds, pulses, and dialogues with each gesture of consciousness. Remaining in this field of perception is a practice, a choice renewed each day, and also a rare opportunity to live not as one who merely survives, but as one who participates in a continuous creation. If science reveals that reality bends before observation, spirituality translates this same discovery into symbolic language. Awakening can be seen as the opening of a window in a house we believed we already knew entirely. Suddenly, light enters from an unexpected angle, showing colors that once seemed non-existent. Nothing in the room has changed, but everything has taken on another quality. The external world remains the same, but the way it vibrates within you is transformed. In mystical tradition, this change is often compared to seeing the world as if it were woven by invisible waves. Each thought, each emotion, would be like a note in a continuous symphony. Awakening arises in the moment you realize that you are not just someone listening to the music, you are also an instrument vibrating together with the orchestra. And suddenly, reality ceases to be a distant stage to become direct participation, an intimate dance between consciousness and matter. This perspective can also be understood through the image of water. Reality is like a lake that at first glance seems still, but all it takes is throwing a small stone, and ripples begin to expand. Awakening is the moment you realize that each of your gestures, even the most subtle, produces ripples that alter the entire field. What once seemed rigid and indifferent reveals itself to be sensitive and responsive. But what if time is also observing you? This question may sound strange, but it carries an essential point. Reality is not just a backdrop, it is a presence that also reacts. Those who live awake begin to recognize this dialogue in details that others ignore. A chance encounter, a word spoken in synchronicity, the sense that something greater is discreetly guiding events. None of this is isolated chance. It is the expression of an intelligence that permeates life. Awakening in this sense is not only personal, it expands toward a collective field. When one mind opens to perceive reality in a broader way, space is created for others to awaken as well. It is as if each consciousness were a torch. Lighting one not only illuminates your own path but also offers clarity around you. Individual transformation reverberates like waves throughout the entire human field. The oldest spiritual traditions already intuited this phenomenon. Some describe reality as an interconnected web in which each node responds to the movement of the others. Modern neuroscience, in turn, speaks of neural resonance and of how emotions and states of consciousness can be transmitted between people, even in silence. Awakening, therefore, is not only an individual gain, but a collective calling that resonates in multiple directions. Between what is seen and what vibrates, there is an interval that few feel. It is in this subtle space that reality reveals its true nature. Some call it intuition, others expanded perception, but the name matters little. What counts is the experience of being present enough to hear what normally gets lost in the noise. To be awake is to cultivate this listening. At this point, it becomes possible to understand that awakening does not eliminate mystery. On the contrary, it intensifies it. Reality does not become more predictable, but deeper. What once seemed banal begins to carry layers of meaning. A simple breath, a glance, or the movement of trees in the wind cease to be neutral landscapes and begin to reveal hidden dimensions. The everyday becomes a portal. Perhaps you too have felt this. A common moment that, without explanation, expanded into something greater, almost sacred. Awakening does not create these moments. It only removes the fog that prevented you from recognizing them. The world has always pulsed in this way, but now you allow yourself to see. This way of living does not require escaping reality, but returning to it with new eyes. It is as if life were constantly calling you with subtle signals, and, upon awakening, you finally answered that call. Every detail becomes language, every event carries a message. And in this process, reality, once perceived as a distant object, becomes an intimate partner on the path of consciousness. Up to this point, perhaps the feeling is that awakening expands horizons, revealing a deeper and more sensitive reality. But there is a moment that completely reverses understanding, realizing that awakening is not only about seeing more, it is also about unlearning. It is not just about adding new perceptions to your repertoire, but about letting go of convictions that once seemed unquestionable. The human mind constantly seeks stability, trying to organize reality into fixed categories, as if that could protect us from uncertainty. However, true awakening manifests precisely in the collapse of these certainties. What once seemed absolute begins to unravel. This unraveling is not loss, it is liberation. By letting go of rigid definitions, the world reveals its natural fluidity, and life presents itself as continuous creation. The breaking of the pattern arises when you realize that control was always partial. As much as the mind tries to define, plan, and predict, reality insists on moving in ways that go beyond any calculation. Awakening at this point brings not only wonder, but also discomfort. It is the shock of realizing that you do not control the fabric of life, but at the same time, you are an inseparable part of it. Not all presence is perception, and not all absence is silence. This phrase could summarize what occurs at this stage. Reality does not depend on your attention to exist, but the way you relate to it radically transforms the experience. To stop demanding that everything fit into the structures of the mind opens space for a more direct contact with what simply is. This is the moment when awakening ceases to be only enchantment and becomes practice. It requires courage to remain before the mystery without reducing it to formulas. Courage to accept that reality is greater than any narrative, and it is precisely at this point that the paradox arises. The loss of certainties does not generate emptiness, but fullness. This turning point also provokes a kind of emotional rupture. What was once lived automatically now becomes a field of conscious choices. Reaction gives way to response, and haste opens space for a kind of presence that needs no justification. It is as if the world ceased to be only scenery and began to reveal itself as an interlocutor, to observe again, now without the name. This exercise is simple but profoundly transformative. By looking at a tree without calling it a tree, by feeling the breath without trying to describe it, something is revealed. Reality shows itself beyond the concept. It is in this space that awakening takes form, because there the mind cannot interfere with labels, and the real presents itself in its nakedness. And there is an even more radical detail: the awareness that you are also part of what you observe. There is no definitive dividing line between observer and observed. This perception dissolves the sense of separation and gives rise to a broader understanding of unity. Awakening at this level is not only about seeing differently, but about being different, a change in the mode of existing. This understanding can generate profound impact. After all, if there is no absolute separation, every gesture, every thought, and every feeling participates in reality as a whole. Your life is not isolated. It reverberates in the collective field. This is the point where responsibility and freedom meet. Everything you do matters, not only for you, but for the fabric of life. And here we arrive at the practical calling of this part. If you are feeling this resonance, if you realize that awakening is not only a concept, but a living movement that touches your reality, I want you to do something simple right now. Like this video and write in the comments the phrase, "I choose to live awake." This declaration is not just interaction, It is a symbolic gesture, a way of sealing the choice to consciously participate in the creation of your reality. By writing, you not only affirm it to yourself, but also share it with everyone who also walks this path. The turning point we have described is not merely theoretical, it finds echo in the oldest human narratives. Whenever a culture tried to speak about awakening and about the true nature of reality, it did so through myths and stories. Not for lack of rational knowledge, but because some truths cannot be captured in linear explanations, they can only be transmitted through images that touch the soul's deep memory. It is told the story of a traveler who, from an early age, believed the world was made of walls. For him, everything had clear boundaries, right and wrong, inside and outside, beginning and end. He walked believing that his role was only to follow the already traced roads, never questioning if there was more beyond what the eyes could reach. For a long time, this belief gave him security, but it also kept him trapped in a predictable and limited landscape. One day, in the midst of a journey, he came across something that did not fit into his logic, a solitary door standing in the middle of nowhere, with no walls to support it. The door led nowhere, and at the same time seemed to lead in all directions. Standing before it, the traveler felt discomfort. If all he knew were walls, how could he accept a passage without a border? He stood there for a long time, trying to rationalize the scene, until he realized that the door was less an object and more an invitation. Awakening begins at this point, not in crossing the door, but in recognizing that its existence dismantles the idea that reality must always obey the categories we create. By extending his hand and touching the cold wood, the traveler realized that his worldview was not the only one. What presented itself there was not just a curious experience, but a rupture. The understanding that reality is not closed, but open, and that limits exist only as long as we believe in them. This myth echoes in the journey of each one of us. Awakening is the solitary door in the middle of the path. Unusual, disconcerting, impossible to be explained by the old rules. The choice lies in refusing the invitation and continuing along the same predictable route, or accepting that reality is vaster and that consciousness can redesign the way of walking. Traditions have called this experience by various names: enlightenment, gnosis, liberation. But the symbol is always the same: a hero who leaves behind the safe territory and enters an unknown dimension. Not because he sought adventure, but because reality revealed itself to be greater than he supposed. This crossing, more than an external movement, is an inner revolution. The most curious thing is that upon crossing the door, the traveler did not find another world, but found again the same world as before, only now seen with different eyes. The trees were still in the same place, the road still cut across the horizon, people still spoke with the same voice, but nothing seemed the same, because now he perceived the secret breath that runs through all things. Awakening does not transport you far away. It brings you back close, but with a renewed gaze. This story reminds us of something essential. Reality does not need to change for experience to change. What transforms is the way of relating to it. The door does not create a new universe, but reveals the depth that was always hidden. And it is this depth that reconfigures life, bringing freshness to each gesture. If you have ever lived moments when the ordinary became extraordinary for no apparent reason, you know what we are talking about. This is the sign of awakening, realizing that reality, even in its simplicity, holds infinite layers. Breakfast, a banal conversation, the breeze touching your face, everything can become revelation. The extraordinary is not rare. It is the awakened way of looking at the ordinary. Deep down, the symbolic door is always before you. Every conscious choice is a passage. Every time you let go of a certainty to make room for mystery, you cross through. The myth of the traveler is only a reflection of what we all live, the silent invitation of reality to see beyond mental walls. In the traveler's story, the solitary door was not just a metaphor, it was also an exercise in perception. It revealed something that was already present, but that could only be recognized by those who allowed themselves to stop before the unexpected. Awakening, in the same way, does not happen in distant lands, but in the way you relate to the reality that already breathes around you. The question is, how to cultivate this way of seeing? The first key lies in the body. It is the territory where consciousness meets the world. feeling the feet touching the ground, the air going in and out, the silent beating of the heart. Each of these simple experiences opens space for perception to anchor in the present. When attention rests on these sensations, something changes. The mind loses a bit of its haste, and reality begins to show itself with more clarity. Awakening is not escape to afar, it is return to the very flesh, to direct contact with life. One possible practice is to choose a moment in the day to reduce speed, to sit in silence, close your eyes, and perceive the body as if it were a vibrating field. There is no need to seek special states, just feel. This simple attention to what is happening now opens space for the mind to cease its need to label, and in this space without haste, reality reveals itself as broader. Another key lies in the gaze. We are used to naming everything automatically. Trees, streets, people, objects. Everything receives an instant label. But what if for a few seconds you observed without the weight of names? By looking at a flame without calling it fire, or perceiving the movement of clouds without calling them clouds, the world begins to present itself more directly. This practice is not to deny language, but to rest from it. In the silence of concepts, reality shows itself as living presence. This training intensifies in coexistence. In a conversation, for example, you may choose to listen without anticipating responses. Just listen, as if receiving not only words but also the state of the other. This deep listening opens invisible channels. You perceive emotions, pauses, rhythms. Awakening, in this sense, becomes relational, not only individual. Reality is woven together, and this recognition creates more authentic bonds. Among the ancients, there was the practice of contemplating fire, water, or the night sky as portals to expanded states of consciousness. It was not superstition, but a way of aligning perception with rhythms greater than the human. You can do the same. Sit before a river, or look at the stars until time dissolves. Gradually, the sensation arises that reality is not separate from you. It pulses along with your breath. But perhaps the most powerful exercise is to cultivate the question instead of the answer. To ask yourself, what is this moment before I name it? What is reality before I organize it into memories and expectations? These questions do not ask for logical solutions. They work like keys that keep the mind open, preventing premature closure in certainties. Awakening grows precisely in this space of openness. Practices like these do not require isolation or abandonment of daily life. On the contrary, they take root in daily life. The act of having coffee, walking down the street, or lying down at night can become fertile ground for this wider contact. Reality does not hide in secret places, it offers itself in every detail. Awakening is only the willingness to see. By cultivating these gestures, you begin to notice that perception refines itself. Colors seem more vivid, sounds deeper, relationships more meaningful. Not because the world has changed, but because your presence has changed. Awakening is this fine adjustment in consciousness that transforms reality into dialogue. And perhaps the greatest technique is not to force. Awakening is not achieved through tension, but through relaxation. It does not require conquest, but surrender. It is enough to open space and allow the real to present itself in its fullness. Reality, after all, does not need to be created. It is already here. The work is only to remove the layers the mind imposes. What we began in the stillness of the body and in the simplicity of perception now expands as a silent certainty. Awakening is not a destination to be reached, but a way of being present before reality. Each conscious gesture, each instant, lived with attention, opens passages that reveal hidden layers of the real. It is not about escaping to afar, but about an intimate approach to what has always been here, waiting to be noticed. Awakening transforms because it removes the weight of ready-made narratives and restores freshness to daily life. It does not promise to control life, but to teach how to dance with its unpredictable movements. In this space, reality ceases to be a set of external objects and becomes living experience, continuous resonance between you and the world. Some call this enlightenment, others expanded consciousness. The name matters little. What matters is the sensation that reality, once limited by habits and beliefs, now breathes within you with greater amplitude. This contact does not end the search, but inaugurates a different way of walking. Perhaps, throughout this video, something has moved within you. Perhaps a detail has lit a memory or a new perception. If this awakening has already begun to pulse, know that it is not lost. It strengthens each time you choose to remain attentive. And to seal this journey, I want to propose a symbolic gesture. Write in the comments the phrase, "I see reality with new eyes." That way, I will know that you made it to the end of this video and chose to walk together in this transformation. And if this content resonated with you, subscribe to the channel to continue receiving messages that deepen this awakening and open new perspectives of reality.